How many plant protection applications can be saved with a VineForecast algorithm? And how does the infestation with powdery and downy mildew differ compared to a standard spraying sequence? With this question in mind, we started into a field trial that we did together with the company Certis Belchim. In this video, you will find out how the results looked like in the end of the season and why the second week of June was so crucial. And with this, welcome to my presentation about the field trial on the VineForecast algorithm. Before we get to the field trial, I'll briefly summarize for those of you who haven't heard of VineForecast yet, how VineForecast works and how it helps you to optimize the scheduling of plant protection measures. A central function of VineForecast is the prediction of the vine diseases downy and powdery mildew. At the basis, VineForecast uses standard weather forecasts such as those produced by the German Weather Service, the British Met Office or Meteo France. These forecasts are based on computer models of the atmosphere. The models are initially fed with information about the current state of the atmosphere. This includes data from weather stations, satellites or airplanes. Subsequently, physical laws are used to calculate how the weather will develop in the future. You can see such a forecast here on the map on the left. Here, the temperature at 2 meters above ground is shown. The temperature ranges from approximately 18 degrees Celsius, here shown in the northwest in blue, to around 23 degrees Celsius, here shown in yellow in the northeast. As you can see, the forecast is quite pixelated. This is because the associated weather model, here a model from the German Weather Service, has a resolution of 2 by 2 kilometers. So every pixel you can see here has a dimension of 2 by 2 kilometers. And even the best high-resolution weather models nowadays have at best a resolution of 1 by 1 kilometer. For viticulture, where microclimatic effects play a central role, this is naturally quite inaccurate. That's why we at VineForecast have developed an AI algorithm that subsequently brings such a standard weather forecast for essential variables such as temperature to a 50 by 50 meter resolution. To do this, we provide the AI with additional information about the topography. The AI can then use this extra information to correct the standard weather forecast. This process is also known as downscaling of the weather forecast. In case of the temperature forecast, for example, this downscaling can reduce the forecast errors by up to 50% when compared with weather station measurements. I link you to our blog post on the topic of downscaling in the video description below. You can see what such an optimized weather forecast looks like on the map here in the middle. You can clearly see a valley that is much warmer than the surrounding area. The wine and geography loving nerds among you have probably already recognized it long ago. It's the valley of the river Moselle. So we can see that the temperature forecast along the valley is calculated about 2 degrees Celsius warmer than the surrounding area. Here we can actually observe a very typical effect for valleys. On the one hand, valleys are logically lower than their surroundings. And as you may know, the atmosphere cools down with altitude, or saying it the other way around, it warms up as we go further down. On the other hand, valleys have what is known as an amplification factor. This causes the atmosphere in a valley to warm up faster than the atmosphere above a plain, especially on clear sky days. At night, on the other hand, the atmosphere in a valley cools down more quickly. Now, the optimized weather forecast is fed into disease models from viticulture. On the right-hand side, for example, the risk of secondary downy mildew infections is shown on the map. To estimate the disease risk, the variable with the somewhat complicated name degree hours at leaf wetness is often used. This variable sums up the hourly temperatures over a day, provided that the leaves were wet at the relevant hour. If there was no leaf wetness at a day, the value of the degree hours at leaf wetness is 0, and there is no risk of infection. However, if the leaves were wet at certain hours and a value of over 50 is reached, then the risk of infection increases. So here on the map, there is an increased risk of infection for all regions with yellow to red colors. But how do we get from the pure infection forecast to an optimization of the spray strategy? To understand this, we first need to look at current practice in vine protection. Often, static spray intervals of 8 to 12 days are used between individual applications. This is shown here as an example on the left-hand side of the diagram. However, static spray intervals can lead to inefficiencies and even higher risk of infestations, as this strategy does not adapt sufficiently to the risk of infection as well as the new growth. The VineForecast algorithm, on the other hand, combines information about the weather, the infection risks, and new growth with data from the app's farm management functions. In example, primarily providing information about previous crop protection applications. Overall, this means that spraying intervals are extended in phases with low to no risk of infections, whereas shorter spray intervals are recommended in phases with a high risk of infection, as in the case in the example for application number 3 and application number 4. This improved scheduling means that the plant protection products are used in an optimal way so that the risk of yield losses is decreased, and the use of plant protection products might as well be reduced over the course of the year. And it was precisely this strategy that we tested in the field trial this year and compared it with a standard strategy. So let's finally come to our field trial. The field trial was carried out in Spiesheim, a little southwest of Frankfurt, in the winemaking region of Rheinhessen. Different variants were tested at the trial site. There were trials for plant protection against powdery as well as downy mildew. Since 2022, Certis Belchim has been carrying out annual field trials in a Müller-Thurgau plot in Spiesheim with different variants of spray sequences. The trials investigate how well infestation with powdery and downy mildew can be contained by the plant protection applied in the respective variants. Importantly, untreated controls were used for powdery and downy mildew in order to measure the effectiveness of the plant protection at the end of the season. For the plant protection trials against downy mildew, the untreated control was only sprayed against powdery mildew. This means that in the untreated control, downy mildew was able to do as it wanted. Conversely, in the untreated control for the powdery mildew trials, plant protection was only applied against downy mildew. Two trial variants are now important to us. One is the VineForecast variant, which was sprayed with the scheduling of the VineForecast algorithm, and the other is the comparison variant. This was the so-called IPM spray sequence. IPM stands for Integrated Pest Management. This spraying sequence was based on the recommendation of the local advisory service and the local pesticide dealers. Both variants had the same sequence of plant protection products, but differed in the timing of the applications. You'll see exactly what I mean in a moment. Let's first take a closer look at the weather and infection patterns at the site. In 2024, the experimental site in Spiesheim had very good conditions for the development of downy mildew, which dominated the first half of the season, as well as for the development of powdery mildew, which became unusually strong from the flowering onwards. First of all the data shown here comes from the VineForecast system. The graph on the top shows the time series of the temperature and precipitation from January to end of August 2024. After a cold spell in January, the temperatures remained relatively mild for the time of the year until the first half of April. Due to these significantly too warm temperatures, the buds slowly began to sprout already in the first half of April. The BBCH stage here is shown in black, and the daily leaf growth in square centimeters per day is here shown in green. And here we can see that the first leaves already start to develop in early to mid-April. However, a massive cold snap in the second half of April slowed down this development considerably and unfortunately led to quite some frost damages in many places. Fortunately, however, the trial site in Spiesheim was largely spared from this frost damage. It was not until beginning of May that the temperature rose again and the vines were able to pick up speed again. And now you can see quite clearly that the phase up to the flowering had ideal conditions for infections with downy mildew. From mid-May in particular, the almost daily rainfall led to very high infection risks for downy mildew, as you can see here on the bottom graph, for Plasmopara viticola, which is the Latin name for downy mildew. The subsequent flowering period was characterized by unusually cool and dry weather. The low temperatures led to very slow development of the vines. The phenology graph clearly shows how the leaf growth here slumps sharply in the second week of June, and this collapse in leaf growth will become relevant again later. Afterwards, warmer temperatures then set in again, so that high infection risks of powdery mildew could develop with the outgoing blossom, and powdery mildew became actually the leading disease until the end of the season. Now let's finally have a look onto the results of the field trial. Let's first start with downy mildew. Here you can see pictures of the untreated control as they were taken at the end of the season at the field day of Certis Belchim. You can clearly see a lot of damage was done by downy mildew. In contrast, let's have a look onto the variant of VineForecast. Here you can see the grapes are healthy and also the leaf wall is quite healthy as well. When you look closer, you may find some oil spots, but generally the results were really nice. And now also have a look in the video on the damage downy mildew did to the untreated control. Yeah, huge damages in the leaf wall as well as for the bunches. In contrast here, the VineForecast variant, you can see grapes are healthy and also the leaf wall, only little oil spots that appear somewhere, but the bunches are really healthy. And now I try to explain to you how the VineForecast algorithm helped us during the season to arrive at an optimized spraying schedule. Here you can see screenshots of the VineForecast app that I took during the season. The screenshots are unfortunately taken in German because when I took the screenshots, my browser was in German. You can see that on the 29th of April, first infections of downy mildew were predicted for the 3rd of May. And that's why the algorithm recommends spraying against Peronospora, which is a term German winemakers use for downy mildew, for the 2nd of May. Because in preventive plant protection, we always want to spray before an infection risk. And as the forecast remained stable, the first spraying against downy mildew with Volpan was finally carried out on the 2nd of May. So this screenshot is now from the 3rd of May after we applied the fungicide and after also we recorded the fungicide application in our farm management system. Now you again can see that for the 3rd of May there's still a risk for downy mildew. Now it's in English. Predicted, as well as for the 5th of May. We have infection risk for downy mildew. However, now no new spraying is recommended as the plants are still protected. So the new growth and the precipitation limits are not reached, and therefore the algorithm does not recommend a new spraying date yet. However, things changed, and at the 13th of May, a phase of sometimes severe downy mildew infections was predicted. So here you can see we have even very high infection risk of downy mildew at the 16th and 17th of May. The protection against downy mildew from the last spraying now was predicted to expire at the 16th of May. And that's why we can see on the right hand side that the app predicts unprotected infections. And that's what we don't want. And therefore, the algorithm recommends a next spraying at the 15th of May, the last day where we still have protection against infections, as our next spraying date. And as the forecast stayed stable again, we sprayed Delam Pro finally on the 15th of May. And now I think you understand how the VineForecast app helped us throughout the season to arrive at an optimized spray schedule. And here you actually can see then the final spray schedule that we had in the VineForecast variant. And very interestingly, we also had a very long spray interval of 16 days for Profiler, which only had an 11-day interval in the IPM spray schedule. And why is this? In the second week of June, we had relatively low temperatures, and these low temperatures really led to very low new growth. And because we had so little new growth, we could wait longer until we needed to apply the next fungicide. And Profiler is also a systemic fungicide, so it also can better protect the new growth in comparison to a contact fungicide. And now let's finally have a look onto the results. Here in the graphs you can see the disease severity. In black you can see the disease severity for the control, so for the untreated parcels. And you can see that at the 21st of July, nearly 100% of the bunches were destroyed by downy mildew. And as well for the leaves we can see like 60% of the leaf wall had symptoms of downy mildew. On the other hand, for the VineForecast as well as for the IPM variant, we can see there was nearly no disease severity on the bunches. So we can say the bunches were completely healthy. And for the leaves, we can see some damage, but the damage is still considerably lower than in the control. And we can translate these results into efficiencies of the spray strategies. And the overall results indicate that we do not have any difference between the VineForecast trial and the IPM trial. And that's very interesting because in the VineForecast trial we skipped one application of one spraying, and that was actually an application of Zorvec-Celarine, which is a very potent fungicide. And now let's have a look onto the results regarding powdery mildew, which are probably even a bit more interesting. Here again a picture now from the powdery mildew trial, and you can see also powdery mildew did a great job in destroying the bunches. All bunches had a lot of powdery mildew, and actually in the trial you can even smell it. And also here the leaves, they had as well some powdery mildew. On the other hand, in the VineForecast trial, the bunches were mostly healthy. When you look closer, you could actually find some powdery mildew, but that's also to be expected in these field trials because these untreated controls, they sometimes stood just directly next to, for instance, the VineForecast trial or other trials. So you had really immense disease pressure onto the other trials due to the untreated controls. And also here in the video now of the untreated control, you can see a lot of damage, and everywhere powdery mildew was on the grapes and as well on the leaves. And now let's have a look onto a video of the VineForecast trial. Most of the grapes are healthy. Once in a while you can actually spot some infestations, but generally very good results. And this although untreated controls were close by. Now again, let's first have a look onto the IPM spray schedule. The IPM schedule started at the 26th of April with Stullen, so that's net sulfur. And the sprayings then were carried out with spray intervals from 7 to 12 days. And now let's have a look how the VineForecast app guided us during the season with respect to the sprayings against powdery mildew. Again, here the screenshots are in German. Oidium is the term German winemakers use for powdery mildew. And the first infection risk for powdery mildew, the app predicted for the 1st of May. And therefore, with respect to preventive plant protection, the app recommended 1 day before the infection risk, so the 30th of April as our first spraying date. And that's actually the first date when we sprayed in the VineForecast trial against powdery mildew, and the product here was net sulfur. And eventually, throughout the season, we were able to skip 3 sprayings against powdery mildew. And again, we had also a very long spraying interval here with 18 days where the product Luna Max was used, and it was applied at the 8th of June. And as you can remember, that's the second week of June. We had this slow growth in this period, as well as that now Luna Max is again a systemic fungicide. And these two things together were the reason why we could have a spray interval of 18 days, which was 7 days longer than in the IPM trial. And now let's have a look onto the results for the powdery mildew trial. The untreated control showed really strong damages by powdery mildew, especially for the bunches. At the 18th of July, about 70% of the bunches were damaged by powdery mildew, whereas for the VineForecast and the IPM trial, the damage was way less. The leaves were a bit healthier, but still quite some damage in the control, and as well you can see some damage in the VineForecast as well as the IPM trial. Again, we can translate this into the efficiency of the spray strategy, and we can see that the efficiency in the VineForecast trial and the IPM trial did not differ a lot, and actually the VineForecast trial had even better results with respect to the efficiency of the strategy on the bunches. And keep in mind that we skipped 3 sprayings in the VineForecast algorithm and we still arrived at similar or maybe even slightly better results. In conclusion, we can say that the field trial with the VineForecast algorithm showed that up to 3 plant protection measures could be saved for both powdery and downy mildew compared to a standard spraying sequence, while maintaining the same level of plant protection effectiveness. Precise scheduling of the application, therefore, is really important for the effectiveness of the products. And this brings me to the end of my presentation. If you like to find out more about VineForecast, visit our website, follow us on Instagram or LinkedIn, or subscribe to this YouTube channel. See you next time.